Hello, everyone. This is Rajiv here. Welcome to Secureum's SafeCast. This is a series on SAFU with Secureum, where our special guest today is Gonçalo Sá from ConsenSys Diligence. ConsenSys Diligence is one of the sponsor partners of Secureum's Epoch Zero Bootcamp on smart contract security auditing. Gonzalo is a co-founder of the ConsenSys Diligence team, has 20 plus years of experience in offensive security. Notable achievements range from cracking DRM algorithms to breaching a major international consumer electronics retailer. While studying aerospace engineering, Gonzalo built 3 startups in adtech, biotech, and mobile. Passionate about turning MVPs into production-ready products, he has also mentored a fair share of entrepreneurs in the past 5+ years. Welcome, Gonzalo. Thanks for coming on Secureum SafeCast series on SAFU with Secureum. Gonzalo, why don't you please tell us a bit more about yourself and your journey into the ether?
Hello, Rajiv. Hello, everybody. I'm super glad to be here. Thank you for the invite. Yeah, my journey into the ether. I was at an inflection point in my life, and with my very anarchist ideals not very well formed, I was steered into cryptocurrencies, and at that time, Ethereum was just launching, and I fell completely in love with the notion of decentralized computing. It was something that I hadn't thought of, and it was a super deep rabbit hole for me, and everything changed from that point onward. Um, I left everything I was doing before to some nasty consequences, even to both my professional and personal life, um, and started getting deeper and deeper into the ecosystem. Started mining Ethereum right at the beginning with 2 other friends, and the light bulb that came on and joined my 2 passions, so security and Ethereum blockchain, was the moment when when I convinced my 2 other friends that we should put all of our ETH into the DAO, the original DAO, right? And we all know how that ended up. And I promised myself that I would never again let this happen to me or them. And so I started auditing stuff on my own, for my own personal usage in game.
That's fascinating, Gonzalo. So, welcome again. So, Gonzalo, we have this fun format for SafeCast where we have only 8 questions, loaded questions though, that we'll be discussing. And in the spirit of programming language nerdiness, which I'm sure you'll appreciate, the questions are zero indexed from 0 to 7. So let's start with question number 0. Question 0 is about ConsenSys Diligence, its origin, its role within the broader ConsenSys firm, and involvement specifically in the Ethereum security space. So, how did everything start? What does ConsenSys Diligence stand for in this space? What does your team look like? Are there any special focus areas? And how do you work with the broader ConsenSys organization, given that there is Codify, Infura, MetaMask, Quorum, and Truffle, besides Diligence, in the ConsenSys ecosystem?
So the great question. ConsenSys Diligence came to be very organically. Um, ConsenSys at the time was a somewhat different place, to say the least, and it was structured as a venture studio, right? People might remember, people that were around back then might remember that ConsenSys called the projects that it incubated spokes, right? And and everything about people that were at ConsenSys at the time was very free flowing. So there was not really any structured format for building stuff or even what to build. And diligence came out of this like very like boiling melting pot of ideas and wants and needs for the Ethereum ecosystem. And originally there were 5 of us that got together to do security. There was no diligence back then. There was no idea of a team or a company or anything like that. We were just passionate about Ethereum. We were passionate about improving solidity, and back then even LLL, right? The first, very first audit that we did without even being diligence at the time was an audit of ENS's first contract written in LLL by Nick Johnson. And after that, we saw. I remember seeing a lot of audits done by both Nick and Piper Merriam, for example. And after that, we saw that there was like an immense need for other projects to get validated by someone that had been studying it, had been in the weeds for a while with whatever nascent technology was existed at the time, right? And this meant mostly Solidity and LLL, more Solidity. It started being more Solidity really fast, more Solidity than LLL. But we just got together. It was a group of 5 people that wanted to help other projects in the space, and we would produce very rudimentary markdown written reports on exactly just on code related bugs, right? Mind you, the contracts back then were still really simple, so there wasn't a real need to go any deeper. Everything was everyone is still experimenting, and so things are very different. But that's basically how it started, and that's what we stand for. So to tackle the second part of the question, that's exactly what we stand for. We've always been here to improve the ecosystem, to help. Like if other people make it, we will make it too by proxy, right? We were all invested in the ecosystem since early on, and so we just wanted everybody to have safe code out there. That was basically it. Diligence has morphed into a full-fledged, more organized team, and right now we do tackle a lot of different aspects of the security pipeline for EVM based projects, basically, in off-chain stuff that is somehow related to blockchain as well. Not only have we kept the services side of things, but we have started inside Diligence like a product team that whose objective is to just like produce tools that shift security left, and I'm sure that we'll talk about that in a quick minute, and I can explain that better. About Diligence inside ConsenSys, we use ConsenSys as our test bed for all these things, right? More and more we work better with other projects in ConsenSys, especially since ConsenSys has changed itself, right? And the model is not as much a venture studio, but more of a software house. And we have started to implement the good practices inside the house first. So after all, like if you're not dog fooding, you probably don't believe what you say that much. But nothing really changes, really. It's the same old Diligence.
The next question is about smart contract audits, right? Our favorite topic here at Secureum, and obviously the origins of diligence as well. So diligence has likely performed hundreds of smart contract audits, right? What are your key learnings from all that you wish projects paid more attention to? Are there any particular aspects that stand out more than the rest? Say, insufficient understanding of basic security pitfalls of EVM solidity by developers, ignoring best practices in the space, insufficient testing of edge cases, or anything else?
So I love this question, and mostly because I don't think that any of these aspects that you just talked about are the problem. They're just like symptoms of something that has plagued the infosec industry for years. And I think the first thing that I've noted over the years, and mind you, this is also coming from the fact that before diligence, I had never done security professionally, right? So I was more of a gray hat. I never turned into the corporate world to to build any expertise in security. And so what I realized, and I had heard this before, but what I realized is that development teams regard security teams as adversarial by definition, right? And that's totally not what we want to go for. We are not criticizing your code specifically. We are, and this is especially true for diligence, and we have made very, very big efforts in being as kind and as permitting as possible for our clients to work better with us. But we are not there to criticize. We're not there to be adversarial. We are trying to work together with you to make your code better, right? We do have some responsibility, and I know that we'll talk about this in a little while as well. But more often than not, we do not want you to force you into anything. We just purely want to help. Also, like on the side of like the interpersonal relationships that happen between a security team and a development team, I think that developers have been so passionate, and they have thought for so long about their code and about their systems that they forget that when we come in, it is extremely difficult for us to ramp up as quickly as they'd like. This is a form of rushing, and this is true for both knowledge of the system, but also how much pressure development team put on security professionals, right? I think it's doing everybody a disservice if you want your security reviewer, your security auditor to rush into something. When you look at security, you shouldn't be thinking about it as a stamp that you need before you go into production or before you deploy anything. You should be looking into it as a form of improvement, right? Like it's not something that is like a atomic, like it's not silent. It's something that you should be doing from day zero to infinity, right? It's a continued effort, and so being both adversarial and also maybe as a consequence or as a corollary, trying to rush security auditors is something that does anyone no good. So that would be my first key learning, and it's not something that I wish people would pay more attention to, but that people would maybe be I don't know, like they would accept these things a little bit better. Also, getting a little bit more technical, I think that optimized code is scary, or elegant code. Whenever I hear people talk about elegant code and like fully optimized code, it scares me a little bit, because I think that preferring optimization over readability is almost never a good choice, right? Either you have been in production for many, many years, and the optimizations come out of necessity, but you have something that has been proven for a really long time, and then you already have probably a lot more capital to do way more, to have way more security efforts going for a specific, very little type of like code snippet, or you should just like prefer readability, because at the end of the day, readability is exactly what grants you a better uh, a better place in the statistics for success.
All right. So this question, the next one, is seemingly a favorite question that everyone has for all auditors. Has any project that diligence audited been exploited? Right? I mean, significantly exploited, publicly known. If so, can you, or are you allowed to share some details? What were the reasons leading to the exploit? What were the lessons learned? How have you changed your internal methodology, processes, or expectations from such experiences? And if there haven't been any such major exploits, kudos, great work. But I'm sure you're preparing for that possibility. So how do you, as an audit firm or as an auditor, get into that mindset of that eventuality, if you will? And to what extent are you, or any auditing firm for that matter, liable, legally liable in such situations?
I can't believe this is a this is a favorite question. Taking on the first one, the answer is not really. So, if I'm not mistaken, our only wrecked leaderboard entry is for a 1 day spot check with growth DeFi, and it was even like a composability issue. So definitely, um, definitely out of our spectrum of interaction with them. But we have had several situations of responsible disclosure to projects that we had properly audited that were already in production. So 0xv2 comes to mind, with the signature bypass exploit. It was probably the nastiest we missed. It was resolved hastily, and we gave them all the support needed for the fix. And I'm glad to say that our relationship with the team was really good afterwards too. So I think the entire chain of events was handled really well. But we didn't have a project be exploited in loco, in production. And so what we do in these situations is that we always have retrospectives, right? For the audit work that was done, see what has gone wrong, why it has gone wrong, and then again why and why and why 5 times until we come to a set of improvements, right? So every one of these events has resulted in action points and protocols that we have implemented in our day-to-day activities. So out of this 0x1, for example, I think was came out like the start of our internal knowledge base, and like indexed capabilities for us to search for specific types of projects, because 0x was very early on, like the start of DeFi stuff for us way back when, and we realized that we needed to compartmentalize like all of this different knowledge. As for how to prepare for that possibility, I don't like there's not much preparation, right? Like we do not have any sort of forensic services available, so we do not do that. Nor do we have services provided to our clients of like war rooming. We do it out of respect for our clients, but we don't. It's not a service that we provide, right? It's not a paid service. I think that we do the basic stuff coming out of like prior experience and everything related to our past InfoSec lives, and that is pretty much standardized all across the industry. I think everybody knows the very basic things of what not to do, right? You should log the time of everything. So do not speak publicly about anything that is in a war room at the time, or don't rush anything. So I think this is something that is really obvious, but that development teams forego too many times. Not to rush anything. It's surprising how the instinct in these situations, and if you're a little bit separated, so like if you're in the security team, you can see these very clearly, but I guess that in the heat of the moment, like development teams don't realize it that much. It's surprising to see how the instinct in these situations is to rush something and fall into an even bigger trap, right? So if anything, if there's any advice coming out of this, I think it would be not to rush. About the liability, I think that security auditors and reviewers, so like when you engage with us, again, and going back to the previous answer, you are getting expertise in all security matters related to blockchain, right? So you're getting a professional that has spent many hours previously studying and keeps being updated about all the types of attacks, but they are in no way liable. They are not an insurance company. They are there to help make your products more secure. They are not there to guarantee that nothing is going to happen.
Question 3 is about tooling, something that ConsenSys Diligence is really big on, right? So ConsenSys Diligence, your team has built a suite of tools in the space, including Mythex, Scribble, Harvey, Surya, Carl, Theo, among the many others as well. And my personal favorite is the VS Code Visual Auditor. Whenever I do any manual review of Solidity code. So can you perhaps give us a high-level overview of these tools? How do you use them internally? How do you recommend your clients, project teams to use them? And what the current focus areas are, things like that. Also, given that manual analysis continues to dominate auditing, right, a significant share of the auditing effort, what is your opinion on the role of all these tools in a project's lifecycle, both for your teams as well as the dev teams of projects? And I do see that you strongly advocate a shift left security approach for your clients. So in that context, if you could also touch upon initiatives such as Secureum SCARE, the comprehensive audit readiness evaluation that aims to address basic pitfalls, best practices, things like that, so that later on it enables your auditors to spend more time on deeper security issues. So what are your thoughts on all these aspects of tooling and shift left and this whole life cycle thing?
We do have a lot of tools that we built over the years. I think that they all fall into somewhat different groups. Even more specifically, Methex and Scribble and Harvey. So as I said before, diligence has two major um, subgroups. One of them for services, so everything related to security audits, manual reviews, so on and so forth, and a product team that is only developing tools for automated analysis, and that's where Methex, Scribble, and Harvey fall into, right? So Methex is an API that is comprised of Mithril, which is the dynamic analysis tool, Maro, which is the static analysis tool, and Harvey, which is the fuzzer, right? These tools are very specialized. They obviously require dedicated teams to build because of their complexity, and Scribble was the latest addition to this family. Scribble is as our as our audience might know, Scribble is a property verification language that is meant to stand kind of halfway between just normal testing and full specification of a system, and it's meant to be used by developers, right? It's meant to be easy. It's meant to be expressive. All the others that you mentioned in the question, so tools like Surya, Carl, Theo, or the VS Code Visual Auditor, they are tools built by the services team during our what we call our growth time, in order to make both our lives and our clients' lives easier, right? And again, going back to the what does diligence stand for question, I think this is the embodiment of what we want to be recognized for. We want, when we say shift left, we actually mean shift left. We want you to use more tools, and we want those tools to actually be usable. We don't want them to be we don't want to be cumbersome. We want them to be transparent. Like, we just want them to be there and do stuff for you without you even realizing, right? And you're right. Like, VS Code Visual Auditor is also my personal favorite. Martin built it probably 2 years ago by now, and it's just like the most amazing amazing collection of all of the things that we built over the years into a nice package for VS Code, which seems to have settled as the IDE of choice for most people developing on Ethereum. And it's straight up, I think, the Swiss Army knife of extensions when you're developing in Solidity. Martin has a myriad, like a huge array of other VS Code extensions that are very, very valuable that you should check out. And I'm sure that you can get there through VS Code Visual Auditor's page. You should definitely give them a look. The focus areas for both the diligence team and the tools are, so as I said, like we're now starting to focus more on like an easy way to write properties and tests if you're a developer, right? And shifting left, and therefore that's what Scribble is for. And we are pouring a lot of time and work into Harvey, the fuzzer. And on the more light tooling side, we just keep on cranking with all the extensions and stuff that is easy to use for developers. As for like the place where these fit I don't think there's a place where they fit. You should just use them again from day zero to infinity. I don't think that any of these things are forbidden to use in any specific section of your project's life cycle. I do believe that they are more useful in certain parts, right? So I wouldn't start fuzzing from day zero because you still don't have code, right? Like, but I would start using the extensions from day zero while you are developing. They both have different strengths um, that actually allow them to show their best colors at different parts of the SDLC. But um, I don't think there's specific time to use each one of these. For initiatives like Care, I think that those are exactly the things that we need, right? So we we talk a lot about tooling and how we can engage with clients sooner, right? Like maybe we do a 1 day spot check before your code is even ready, and then an audit later on, and we have all these tools to help you develop code and something like that. But we don't talk about protocols, and any protocol just has the tools to that allows people to interact with security earlier in the project lifecycle is fantastic. And it's going to help us a lot. And I can wait to see um, how it works out. I'm excited.
All right. So we're going to switch gears a bit with question 4. And this one is about talent. So, as you know, talent is a key motivation for the Secureum bootcamp that's ongoing. So, for anyone aspiring to get into the auditing space, let's say specifically into ConsenSys Diligence, how do you think they can catch up with all the technical skills that are required? What sort of cybersecurity and blockchain background would your teams expect from a new hire? Do you think there are any relevant certifications, things like that, that you would recommend? And in that context, would structured efforts such as your own ConsenSys Academy or the more Ethereum security focused Secureum Bootcamp help? And on the flip side, why should someone want to work at ConsenSys Diligence over some of the other reputable teams in this space?
I've heard this a lot. So people asking me how can they catch up with the technical skills required. More often than not, even where should I start? And to be extremely honest, I think I'm a little bit out of touch with this question nowadays. The way I started was by reading Solidity docs and just seeing other people's LLL code, right? And reading the yellow paper. I do not think that that's the way you should start nowadays. I think that would be an extremely hard lift. I'm not saying that these resources are not good, because they are. And at some point, you should read the yellow paper, even if not just for historical reasons. But I feel that I'm a little bit out of touch. Obviously, if we're talking about security specifically, it helps that you have some sort of background, right, in normal InfoSec. But I do not think it is required, right? The skills required for you to do any sort of penetration testing in a Web2 world are somewhat, I'm gonna even say, very different from the ones that you need while auditing Web3 code. Mainly because audits in the Web3 space are white box audits, right? So you always have access to the code, not to mention that the code will always be public bytecode, right? And so the skills don't transfer that well. What does transfer is the headspace. just the way to think about attacking systems. The mentality surely does transfer. In I think I think that it like you don't like focusing on just like learning something very specific to this might not be the best way to go about it. And a good example of that is Nick Ward from the diligence team, who was coming from a civil engineering background, and he had a deep passion for formal methods, and he's just like an excellent auditor, right? So I don't think that there's a set of technical skills, prior technical skills that you need to have, or any sort of cybersecurity background. Sometimes the most amazing and fresh viewpoints in audits come from people that are doing something entirely different before and just have a passion to look for a correctness in any sort of programming language. As for certifications, I don't know if there's anyone that I'd recommend. We certainly do not require anything akin to certifications to work at diligence. But Cheyenne, who just recently left for a CTO position in an Ethereum related Canadian company, he was helping do the C4 certification. I took it myself. It's a very generic certification, so it's not so much focused on security, but the content is pretty good. So that's one of the few that I know, and it's the most recent one, so I guess it's the most updated. So if anything, I'd probably go for something like that. And obviously, both again, like I admire immensely efforts such as Secureum and ConsenSys Academy. I think they're extremely important. The same way that CARE, right? The protocol that we talked about during the previous question is extremely important. If we want to target like the completely lopsided supply demand talent market right now in the Ethereum space, we need security. We need ConsenSys Academy. We need you guys to do the hard work of education, because I don't think we are capable of doing it that well from inside the team. About wanting to work at diligence, I think this is a really easy one. We are a family. We're not a normal team. We are family. We care for each other. Everybody's extremely kind, and that's our expectation from you. I expect you to be kind. I expect you to ask many questions, to ask many dumb questions. And this is also coming from something imbued by John Marglin in the team before he left. We ask a lot of dumb questions. There is no siloing of information. There is nothing adversarial about any of the things that we do. Again, we are family, and that's why you should join us.
So maybe the next question is slightly digging deeper into what you've already touched upon, and also sort of lines up with some of your earlier personal interests and maybe even current interests in offensive security. How did you or how does one cultivate that offensive security mindset when developing smart contracts so that you're just better prepared, or from the other side, from your teams while auditing smart contracts? And I think you touched upon this. So ConsenSys is probably not into pen testing or ward roaming or white hat services for live contracts. But what sorts of tools and related techniques do you think would be useful in such scenarios that don't exist today, right? And are techniques from reverse engineering for example, from the Web2 space, are they still relevant for smart contracts that are perhaps not source verified, you don't have access to the sources? So what do you think about these sort of related questions?
Cultivating the offensive security mindset. Oof. Again, like I don't think I have a clear answer for this. I think that more often than not, and this manifests in different ways, by the way. Nick Ward was an example of a fascinating way where the passion for security manifested in a human being, right? For me, it was entirely different. I have an obsessive need to solve puzzles, right? The same way that that I that I got into lockpicking, because I just want to solve the puzzle that is the lock, right? And obviously the dopamine rush that comes afterwards is also good, right? And and I've cultivated that very naturally. It just came naturally to me. I don't know of a way where you could cultivate this, but maybe take up some of these interests, like maybe take up lockpicking, or start solving those physical puzzles. I don't know. It might manifest differently in you, but again, I don't think I have a good answer for this. Um, consensus ConsenSys Diligence is into pen testing. So we do pen testing for blockchain uh, related projects when they need it, but it's not something that we do very often, right? We have people that have inside the team that have done black box penetration tests for many years, like 10 to 15 in their previous lives. And so we do have the capability to do these things. We just don't do it often because we don't want to stray too much away from the core business, and again, like what we stand for, which is stuff that is built on top of Ethereum. And it's not so common that projects nowadays have large infrastructures that they want pen tested. Basically, they use the Ethereum chain as their data availability mechanism, and so like we don't get like these large infrastructures anymore. The tools that we use in these scenarios are not so much the ones that we built, but rather the ones that you would expect. So anything from Burp to the Burp suite to I don't know, like we just like boot up a backtrack instance and just go at it like one does in normal Web2 interaction. About reverse engineering smart contracts that are not source verified, I don't think this has ever happened to me in an audit. I don't think it has ever happened to anyone at ConsenSys Diligence. I did find myself doing this, but out of my own volition. So just interested in looking at contracts that are on mainnet. I don't think this is an important skill if you just want to be an auditor. To be frank, obviously, again, and everything matters. You can cultivate your interests in a myriad of ways, and I think that it's great that you reverse engineer stuff on your own. It's just not something that is extremely relevant for audits. And I speak against myself because, like, this is probably one of the first things that I did while I was starting in security, when I was still a little boy, was to learn how to reverse engineer x86 programs on Windows. And so I think it's a really fun exercise, and you should do it. As it may not be that important if you're doing audits for Ethereum projects.
All right. So the next question is maybe a personal one, probably more lifestyle related. So the context is the motivation for, for example, the Secureum bootcamp, right? The demand for smart contract audits as you are living it, far exceeds the availability of qualified auditors. And this clearly has an impact on, on the existing firms, on your team members, just in terms of the number of audits scheduled and maybe the time and everything that is at stake. So how does all this, imbalance, if you want to call that, manifest in your life as an auditor? Right? Do you find this stressful? When I say you, I mean anyone in your position, maybe your team members, everyone in the space. How do you think you, for example, manage this situation, stressful situation, to maintain quote unquote a healthy balance, right? I mean, even if there is something like that. So, for example, do you have any Monday morning rituals, right, to deal with the stressful week ahead? And this is, of course, assuming that your week starts on Mondays and it is not like 24/7, 365. So how do you think about this? How do you deal with all this?
Very, very true. The, the demand for audits and auditors far exceeds the availability of the current market, and this imbalance manifests in everyone's life. Diligence. In mine specifically, um, but uh, but also in like everyone else's, right? And I don't think that it manifests differently for each one of us. Um, I think it manifests exactly the same. And there have been times where the team collectively was extremely burned out. You could just feel it in the air, right? This is also partly because we tend to be, as I said before, very permissive with our client relationships, and and we had to learn to take better care of ourselves, right? And sometimes we just need a little bit stricter rules in order to protect ourselves from arriving at that situation ever again. Um, One thing that we implemented um, in as a protocol to deal with a very very unhealthy balance that made itself apparent like in January of this year was that we now uh, never do more than 2 weeks um, in a row during an audit. So we only work for every 2 weeks. We have 1 week. We have 1 week of growth time. Right? And growth time meaning that is time that you use. I guess I didn't explain it well before, but growth time is something that we use to dedicate to any project that we want to internally, that would make Ethereum better, or that would make our team's lives easier, or something like that. And so we implemented this to prevent people from burning out and actually have allow them to have like a clearer head when they get back to the audit. So it's 2 weeks, 1 week of growth, and then another 2 weeks of audit, for example. And this not only results in like better happiness levels all throughout, but also in better work output. I think the reports show exactly what has happened, and in many situations, looking at it from the inside, you can see that there's a spurt of creativity when people get back, right? As a team, like me personally, I don't have a Monday morning ritual. I'm not a super mindful person. Like I think I meditate in 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 different ways throughout the day. But I'm very very jumpy, very very fidgety, and so I don't have like a specific morning ritual other than coffee. we as a team do have like a Monday meeting where we share progress and we talk about everything, and sometimes we just rant, and others we just ask for help. So that's our Monday afternoon. Well, Monday something ritual for the team because people are scattered over the world. So it's neither morning nor afternoon.
All right. So for the final question, question 7, I would like to request you to bring out your favorite oracle to make predictions about where you see ConsenSys Diligence is headed in this space. Right? I mean, we have talked about the origins and the history and all the fantastic work that your team is doing in this space. You clearly has a lot of history in the Ethereum space with audits and tooling. But looking ahead, how do you see ConsenSys Diligence growing and maybe differentiating in this space? Right? What do you see as the path forward, even for the broader Ethereum security space, which in the big scheme of things is still very nascent? Will there be things like a push for licensing and credentialing in this ecosystem, right? That has historically and maybe even philosophically avoided gatekeepers. And will auditors or their firms, ConsenSys Diligence, start assuming any liability in the form of insurance for the contracts that they audit, besides, of course, the reputational damage that already exists? So will auditors be replaced by DAOs, for example, right? I mean, all these sort of forward-looking aspects. Any thoughts on these things and how they're going to affect yourself at Diligence or the broader Ethereum security ecosystem at large?
Super loaded question. Great. I So about the way the space is going to go forward, I think that all of these things, again, like if history has taught us anything, like all of these things will happen eventually. I think that specifically for the licensing and credentialing part of the question, I think it will take a little bit longer than it did for other verticals and other industries, just because of the ideals that fuel blockchain in general, right? In Ethereum specifically, there are much more anarchist ideals than the ones that fueled web, the original web, right? I think that people dedicated to blockchain or the original cypherpunks, like they more often than not, they're not only about freedom, they're truly about anarchy. And so I think that like the licensing and credentialing might take a little bit longer. This is not to say that it won't happen. As for insurance, not only will auditors and their firms start assuming liability and so doing insurance, but they already have started doing that, right? This is definitely a road that Diligence is not going through. That much I can tell you. I think that and again, like we had all these previous questions and we talked about what the team stands for and what we stand for, each one of us individually, and I think that it steers a bit away from our core values. And so this is not to say that we would never see ourselves pushing for or helping like some decentralized ecosystem project that tackles something akin to this. But for the time being, this is not something that we would pursue or something that we would support. Talking about the auditors replaced by DAOs, maybe not entirely sure that I understand like the question here. I think this is extremely this is extremely loaded. I think that people will organize in different ways. It doesn't necessarily need to be structured as a corporation. I think that at the end of the day, auditors are auditors, whether they're in a DAO, whether they're in a company. And I don't even know if there's going to be that much distinction between a DAO and a company in the near future, let's say. And so I think that the security companies or security associations, collectives, security collectives will always exist in one way or another, one shape or another. As for where diligence is going, I think that again our focus is to make developers' lives easier and to make their products more secure. That's it. That's what we will always work on. That's what Scribble is. That's what the VS Code extensions are. And we will continue doing that more and more. And Scribble was a great step in that direction because we really believe that Scribble syntax being very Solidity-like, basically just writing Solidity, will make it easier for people to get some sort of a verification of their specs, right? That is the goal. Like, is just democratize the specification of systems by any developer. Not only that, but being so different from other products that actually require you to fully specify a system, right? Scribble is more additive in that sense. So we are building it for developers, for the developer, and that will be our focus now and in 5 years.
So Gonzalo, with that, we are done with our 8 questions as per the format. But what's the fun of being in security if you don't sort of look at overflows, right? So let's jump to maybe 1 or 2 overflow questions, just so that you've been in this space from scratch, right? Through the DAO exploit, building the team from scratch, working with all these fantastic projects in the ecosystem. So the next question is something I'm sure that you guys asked a lot. So this is about spotting vulnerabilities, right? So there are technical vulnerabilities and maybe the economic ones. So for somebody who is able to spot the technical vulnerabilities, how do they get better at the economic ones? I mean, how do you approach analyzing contracts from an economic perspective rather than just your programming language or EVM specific aspects? And is this something that's fun and challenging part of an audit compared to some of the other foundational ones? Or to make it more personal, what aspects do you personally find challenging in this space, right? Is it the economic vulnerabilities or something more fundamental like the pitfalls and other things? So what do you think about this aspect?
Yeah, so I think that this became extremely fuzzy. So fuzzy for us and our clients that sometimes a lot of clarification is needed. What is a technical vulnerability? What is an economic vulnerability? We can kind of define them, but not really. Some clients have certain expectations. What are we, at the very end of the day, as an auditor, what you're doing is validating that a certain specification matches a certain implementation, right? And sometimes, and also this obviously depends on the clients. Some clients document more, some clients document less. Some clients have their business logic way more documented than then they do comment their code, for example, and even going even a little bit further, things like flash loans have made it even more difficult to separate these things, right? Now, all of a sudden, uh, we are talking about something that we used to look for in the beginning, right? So Ether has a capped supply, for example. It's not infinite, and we can know even that like the how much Ether there could be at any point in time circulating. So we have an upper bound for that. And now all of a sudden, not only do flash loans exist, but people even want to make them infinite with the creation of the WEF10 contract, for example, right? What are these? Like, if we know about these things, if we now can suddenly overflow something that uses WETH, is this like an economic vulnerability, or is it like a technical vulnerability? And if we know about it, like, are we required to know about these things? Are flash loans something that we need to know? I think so. And there are obviously more complicated things that that fall out of our responsibilities. At least thinking about them as an auditor, and but sometimes we're just like caught entirely off guard, right? Uh, uh, by a client that asks us why we haven't made any comments on X, Y, and Z, right? Because again, their expectations are different from ours. Joran, who I know also talked to you, Rajiv, has started doing some light simulations in CAD. So it's not that we're not keeping up with times. We are interested in all of this, and we want to gain new skills, and we want to be able to help our clients the best we can. But I think that it will be somewhat hard to try to be everything. And so there will straight up be things that we cannot worry about. Um, I do think that there are like a lot of challenging things about economic vulnerabilities, and some of them are require very, very, very uh, cumbersome work more often than not, because in order to be validated, some economic stack, you need like a very precise specification of your business logic, which mostly doesn't exist in normal nowadays projects.
Cool. So I think we have time and space for maybe just one more overflow question before we wrap around. And this is a fun one, right? So what is the one thing you love about the blockchain security space compared to all the things that you've done, InfoSec, all the startups before that you mentioned? And similarly, what is the one thing that you dislike about the space and would love to see it changed?
I love that it's super tight knit. Everybody knows each other still, or mostly, and it's not extremely adversarial. It's also not yet super corporate, right? I think that everybody that was around for Ethereum and blockchain in general had really good intentions in the beginning, and so I don't think blockchain security has like a deep dark side, the same way that Web2 does. I think that people that sell exploits in the infosec industry are really bad people. I haven't ever interfaced with anyone that had like ties or viewed the exploits happening in blockchain space the same way. I don't think we have that much of a dark side. That's awesome. I love that. The one thing that I dislike, I think that our practices are like a little bit too scattered. I think that there's not a good public consensus on what an audit is or what the difference is between getting a light review or a proper review. I think there's a lot of confusion still from people in the community about what happens and like what are the differences and all that in between security efforts and all the things that they could do within their SDLC.
Fantastic. So I think we can conclude. So to do that, if let's say if you had just one recommendation for aspiring Ethereum smart contract security auditors, say someone who would love to join ConsenSys Diligence team, what would that recommendation be? And similarly, if you had just one request for protocols, I know that you mentioned a couple in our chat, but if you had just one key request, the biggest one, what would that be so that they get the best out of an audit from ConsenSys Diligence?
Recommendation for aspiring auditors: do capture the Ether, the CTF, built by our amazing ex-Dilly member, Steve Marks. By the way, just going back to the question about like learning resources, go read his blog as well. So you get one recommendation for free. First, go do his CTF. Second, go read his blog called Programming the Blockchain. And the CTF is capturetheether.com. So go check them out. As for the request for protocols, do not rush things. Do not rush. You're not running against anything. It's like, wait, it's going to be fine. Don't rush. Because if you rush, you'll trip and you'll break all your teeth.
Awesome. So great. We have covered 8 questions as promised, and we have overflowed a bit as well, taking the liberty, given that we are security professionals and we know that it wouldn't wrap. But of course, in this case, it is a wrap for this interview with Gonçalo. So thank you, Gonçalo, for coming on Secureum SafeCast in the SAFU with Secureum series and sharing your thoughts on 8 questions, infinite possibilities. And goes without saying, good luck to you and ConsenSys Diligence in making Ethereum safer for all of us. And of course, Secureum would be very keen to assist you in making that mission successful. And I look forward to having you again on Secureum SafeCast sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Rajiv. It was my pleasure. And thank you for all your hard work building Secureum. I know for sure that it will be an invaluable resource for both the security side of things and Ethereum at large.